In this video, we're going to talk about how we formulate a research idea. So to get started, we need to identify a topic area. And so some of this should look familiar to a previous video because we talked about all the steps of the research process in a previous video. Now we're coming back and we're talking about the first two steps: finding a research idea, which involves, maybe you identify a topic that's of interest to you. Or if you can't think of anything that's generally of interest to you, maybe you explore research. And that's one of the things you'll be doing in the next coming weeks, is to explore research to try to find something that interests you so you can formulate a research question. And then we're going to go in and talk a little bit more about how to formulate a hypothesis. We touched on hypotheses and identifying hypotheses previously, but we're going to go into much more detail in this chapter. So again, the important thing is to find something that interests you. If you think about it, you're going to be working on this the entire semester. You're going to be tied to this topic, whatever it is you pick within the next week or so. So you want to find something that interests you. You're going to have to find articles on this topic. You're going to have to read the articles on this topic, probably more than once. Most of the time you read, in order to really understand a primary peer-reviewed article, you read it at least 2 to 3 times. Then you're going to have to write about this topic. You're going to, summarize these articles in your literature review. That's the first half of the semester. Then the second half, you're going to be designing that experiment and executing that experiment. So it really should be something that's interesting to you. Although remember, we are confined by the limitations of this class. It has to be something that can be done in an online environment. We'll discuss more about how we'll use Google Forms to execute your experiments. And it also has to be something that can be done in a fairly short amount of time, because our volunteers will get a little bored if it's too long, and we really can't necessarily ask them to come back a week later because you might lose a lot of your participants. So you might be sitting there going, well, what are some possible sources? So all of these we're going to go over into a lot of detail: personal interest and curiosity, casual observations, reports of others' observations, practical problems, general categories of research, and behavioral theories. So we're going to go into detail in these. And if you're sitting there saying, I have no idea what I would do my research project on, these are things to explore in the next week or so that you can find a topic, formulate a group, and start working on that literature review. So the first one we mentioned is personal interest and curiosity. So what interests you? Pick a topic that you want to learn more about. Maybe you're really into music and you want to know if music really does help while you're studying. Does music improve memory? Is there certain types of music that improves memory? Maybe you want to see, does music reduce anxiety? Looking at the effect of emotion. Or maybe you're interested in, does color affect our emotion, or can it reduce anxieties? All sorts of different things that, maybe, you're interested in. A lot of students are interested in memory and what techniques are going to help them to study better and learn better. Maybe you have a casual observation, behavior of people or animals that may generate a research topic. Now, obviously, we're not going to do animal research, so for this class, your casual observation needs to be something that you've noticed in behavior. That maybe while you're studying, if you have, your phone out, you're listening to music, you've got your computer, you've got a TV in the background, you have all these different things and you're multitasking, that maybe you don't retain as much information. So that could be some casual observation that could lead to a research topic. There's also this idea of reports of other observations. Ideas might come from informal sources, magazines, newspapers, or even academic journals. So maybe you read in a magazine or newspaper that different types of learning lead to better retention. Visual versus auditory or something like that. Or maybe as we go in and start looking at the literature, maybe you'll have to go through a couple different topics before you kind of narrow it down, looking at those academic materials, those primary peer-reviewed research articles, and see what's really out there and is interesting to you. So I just want to discuss a little further about how existing publications can lead to an idea for a new research study. So when you're reading through peer-reviewed articles, the authors generally make explicit statements, typically in the discussion section, of unanswered questions. What did their research not cover? What were they not able to determine? They're going to discuss suggestions for future research. Maybe you take their idea and you tweak a little bit, you do things a little differently. They're also going to mention limitations to their studies. So you could take their idea, focus on those limitations, and change that project just a little bit. And again, most of that's going to be found in the discussion section of these primary peer-reviewed research articles. So this article here, and it's pretty much in APA format, which is something that you're going to have to learn. These are the author's last name, their first initials, last name, first initials, the year it was published, the title of the article, the title of the journal, notice how it's in italics, the title of the volume and the issue number, and then your page numbers, and then your DOI. It takes me to the article, and I'm going to scroll down to the discussion section. So this little section of the discussion says, although the study observed the differences in elaborative and memorization study strategies, that there was no measure of what mental strategies the participants were actually implementing. As such, it is possible that participants in either group could have developed their own elaborations or simply attempted to memorize all of the material. The differences between processing times for elaboration and memorization groups suggest that the study methods were reliably different. Future research could clarify these differences by having the participants record their study activity or report strategies to use. So now you could kind of do the same, implement the same study design, but just change this little detail, and it makes it a new experiment. And you're going to be doing something similar in a discussion assignment following this video. And again, that was the discussion section. So another thing we could do is replicate a study. So I'll show you here in the discussion section that that's basically what this study was. It says this study replicated the study by Furnham, 1994, with a different medium, music, from the radio rather than television. Similar findings were obtained. So again, sometimes people just replicate their own studies using slightly different tweaked nuances. You could create a new idea from two existing results. Take methodologies that you see in two of the articles that you found for your literature review, maybe. You could also use knowledge of components from different research articles, especially the introduction, the discussion, the references. Those are good places to gather information that maybe you could find an idea from. So this is just another example of how existing publications could lead to an idea for a new research study. So this here was an advertisement for a 1964 marketing campaign for the Olympics. And there are other studies that point to this idea. A lot of them are correlations, studies about looking at walking and your health. So the idea is, could you take some of these correlational findings about walking being good for you and put it into an experimental method? You probably could, maybe not for this class, especially not in an online format, but it's definitely something where how you take an idea that's maybe just something you see out there in an advertisement, or something that is a correlational study that you designed and turn into an experiment. So that's one example. So another example is, I had some students a couple semesters ago that they took this idea by Elizabeth Loftus, looking at question wording and false memories. This is her famous experiment where she showed videos of two cars hitting each other, basically getting into an accident. And then she asked us a variety of questions, and one was, how fast were the cars going when they blanked into each other? Well, I had some students that were very creatively put together their own video and changed it around, and instead of being cars, it was a person bumping into another one. And so they made their own short little 30-second video. They put in these critical lures, and they had distractions. And so their idea, they were replicating it in a different fashion. And so that's another way. So another source of topics could be practical problems or research questions. Something that comes from daily life. The placement of audio controls for less distracted driving. What type of learning paradigm helps people remember more? Audio or visual? Behavioral therapies, like testing predictions that are part of a theory. All of these can be common sources for research topics.